Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Sunday, April 2016, 3:33 Rio de Janeiro time. And if you're here with us, remember you have a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed live. And let's get started as usual by taking a look at the news, and I think you're guessing what's the big topic in Brazil and I think everywhere about an attempted assassination on President Trump, or maybe someone else on President Trump's team. And this is the main headline you can see over here, and there's several sub headlines discussing different aspects of the attack. And it looks like, there wasn't anyone really hurt. There was a secret agent who was shot, but he was wearing a bulletproof vest. So everybody's okay. The attacker was captured, and that's it. But as you can see over here, it is taking most of the main pages of every single newspaper in Brazil. And that's understandable, right? And, after this big news, there is some discussion about the upcoming elections in Brazil. President Lula is trying the re-election. If he is re-elected, that would be the fourth term, right? Like President Lula has been a president in Brazil for 3 terms. Now he's trying a 4th term. And very interesting, there are some people who say that would be actually his 5th term, because under President Dilma Rousseff, who was an ally of President Lula, he was actually the one behind the scenes, right? This is the narrative. So some people consider that this would be the 5th term of President Lula in Brazil. I would say, whether you like President Lula or not, he's probably doing something right, because if people keep voting for President Lula, he is potentially doing something right. And there is also a nice discussion, in my opinion, about new options, right, other than President Lula and Bolsonaro. So the idea is that if we have new options, maybe we're going to escape this very polarized dispute between former President Bolsonaro and current President Lula. That's the other headline you see here on my screen. Let's play a short movie about Remax Nomad States. They are our partner for real estate listings in Brazil. They are based in Rio de Janeiro, but they've been working with our clients Trufal Brazil, with properties sold in the Northeast, in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Santa Catarina, and more. So if you do need something like this, take a screenshot and use as you want. All right, let's take a look here at our chat and see if we have any participations already. Yes, and we do have. We have Tora. Boa tarde, senhor Oliveira, e feliz domingo para você. The same to you, Tora. Good to see you over here. Tora says, I asked my Wells Fargo bank for a proof of capacity to transfer money letter. I also had a photo of an example letter that Patrick had sent me. My bank said they cannot write a letter like this unless there is already a legal template in place on their website, which they said there is not this kind of legal template already in place. Yes, Tora, that's a somewhat common reaction. Typically, it's a hit or a miss with the banks, right? If you address a more senior manager, if you do have access to a branch manager, most of the time they are not going to have an issue. If you're dealing with one of those, floor customer representatives, typically they don't have like much range of choice. So if they don't have something pre-existing in their database, that's going to be a standard answer. So one thing you could do is to try to escalate to the actual manager of the branch, because then it changes, like he's going to look at it. And the letter is basically saying that you do have a capability to wire transfer money to Brazil, right? Like, I mean, not rocket science, not creating a lot of liability for the bank. But again, when you're dealing with like more entry-level customer service representatives, that's a somewhat common reply. Two other things we have here at the firm as an option. Another option is like if you have another bank, you can also try to talk to this bank to see if you can get the letter. And last case scenario, you can also make a traditional wire transfer to Brazil, even to our firm. And this wire transfer by itself, it would be proof that you do have the capability of sending money to Brazil. Sometimes we ask our clients to talk to the bank, say, listen, if you're not going to give me the letter, can you write something here saying that you're not going to give me the letter, right? And guess what? Many times they say, well, I don't have a template for that as well. I'm not going to give you anything, right? I think at that point would be a poor customer service, but I guess it could happen because if you have the letter of, if you have any evidence that your bank is not providing the letter, plus a successful wire transfer to Brazil, that's pretty enough for the Brazilian immigration to understand that you do have the capability to wire funds to Brazil. But I'm going to suggest, Tora, that you keep working with Patrick. And Patrick is like one of our main, experts in retirement, digital nomad, and other Brazilian visas. And there is always a way, right? We never had anyone who would not find a way. So, just keep working, and I'm sure you're going to be successful on this requirement, Tora. Many Moon Acres, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Many Moon. Good to see you around. Tora is complimenting the bank branch manager, said he will look into what they can do, but I have waited 4 days already with no result from them. Is there another way to prove the capacity to send money? Yes, Tora. So, like I said, if you actually send the money, that's typically enough evidence. But remember, the Brazilian immigration system, they don't like, those money apps. So if you send by, Wise, Remitly, PayPal, that's not evidence that you can send money to Brazil. They want to have something more formal coming from a traditional bank and talking about wire transfer, right? That's what they're going to be looking for. And again, there is typically some friction on this requirement, but we never had anyone who could not find a solution, Tora. So just hang tight and work with Patrick, that I'm sure you're going to have a solution soon. James Rochas, bom dia, amigo. Bom dia, James Rochas. I only use banks like Nubank, PicPay in Brazil. Are they safe? For example, any risk of sudden closure of bank accounts? James, yes. I mean, Nubank, like it's 100% digital bank. So what we see more than once is like foreign citizens who are going to buy something, like they're going to buy real estate, and they are using Nubank to receive this money, and then they have like a certain deadline, and then Nubank doesn't have a branch, it doesn't have a phone number that you can typically call, and whenever there is a large amount, of course, this is going to a kind of trigger a fraud detection a system that they have, and it may cause delays in terms of releasing the money. And guess what? If you're working on a real estate transaction and you miss a deadline, that could typically trigger a 10% penalty on the total amount for the property. So we don't like. I have a new bank account, right? Like, so I do like a new bank for many things. Like if you're paying, like everyday stuff, there is no better app in Brazil than Nubank's app, okay? But for like larger transactions, I typically do not recommend Nubank because again, you don't have like an actual support that you can call and have a transaction troubleshot on the spot. All right, James. PicPay, many people use PicPay. I haven't used myself, but it's very popular. So in Brazil, James, like my recommendation is maybe to have a couple of accounts. You could keep Nubank for like everyday stuff, and then have a more traditional bank account, which, in my opinion, I like Itaú and I like Santander. So that's typically my recommendation. Have something for everyday like Nubank, and then have a second bank account for more meaningful transactions, and more options, by the way, because Nubank, it's very streamlined and they don't offer many options, right, for what to do with your money. If you have access to either Itaú or Santander, then a whole new world of possibilities is going to open up for you. All right, James, interesting question. Manny Moon, boa tarde, Luciano. Is there any law in Brazil that limits the number of presidential terms? Manny Moon, yes, there is. It has been a while since I looked over those laws, but I think it's like 2 terms in a row, right? 2 terms in a row. So it looks like in the United States, I'm going to assume it's like 2 terms in total, and in Brazil, it's 2 terms in a row. So guess what? Like in theory, someone could be a president for 2 terms and then, take a break and then come back for more terms, and in a kind of never-ending loop. And I don't think it is good. I think, 2 terms should be the absolute limit, because otherwise you don't give an opportunity, for, fresh faces to show up, and you have this, like, kind of old mentality politicians, come back in over and over again, like they set up a kind of political machine, and even if they are not, in power, they still have deep connections, like throughout the political system. And it makes really difficult for, new blood, new faces, new ideas, to come to fruition just because they dominate, right? That's very typical, unfortunately, in the northeast of the country, which is a less developed area of Brazil. And there is like an overlapping of this type of situation. Like the less developed an area is, the more you're gonna see this type of, like old politician, like keeping control of the, local leaderships, local resources. They're gonna be using like the state machine to keep their hold on power. And this is very common in like the Bahia area, like not only like the capital, the coastal area, but the inner state. It's always targeted by politicians, and it's a very sad loop that we see in Brazil. So yes, I think, a limit to how many terms people should be able to be a president in Brazil will be great. Like it should be two terms, right? Not like, well, if you're 2 terms, you can leave and then come back later. I think 2 terms is more than enough, right? Very interesting question, Manny Moon. Matt again, it's good to see you, Matt. Good to see you, Matt and Adrian. Matt is answering to Tora. It took me over 2 months to get the letter from my bank. I just had to keep asking and asking. Thank you for sharing, Matt. Yes, a lot of friction. Indeed, is exactly. I guess, nowadays, and it's not just banks in the U.S., right? Like in the entire country, like there is always this concern about liability, and if you give enough, enough autonomy to people at the bank, they are going to end up doing stupid things, and from that perspective, they try to not to give you this letter. I don't know what happens with the financial system, with the financial institutions in the U.S., but many times people are gonna have a hard time to even wire funds to Brazil. Like they are gonna go to the branch, and people at the branches, they are not really. I don't know. I don't want to use like the wrong word here, but they are not really prepared to be at a bank, right? Like they are, sometimes they, like, I mean, I'm not a native speaker, right? But I feel sometimes I speak better English than people working at the branches in general. And for sure, we know much more about currency exchange than people at the branches in the United States, but it's always, surprising to me that sometimes they are not even able to understand the dynamic of a wire transfer despite being working in a bank. Okay, so yes, a lot of friction, and thanks for sharing, Matt. Brazil vibes. Regarding capacity to send money to Brazil, do your clients have success with sending money with Navy Federal? Brazil vibes. I think like the name is not new to me. I think we may have had people trying. I'm not sure if Navy Federal, if they do have wire capabilities. Very common for clients in California. I don't know why. Like in California, the bank system is super fragmented, right? Even in like the Los Angeles area, San Francisco, like you have, I don't know, like a couple of hundred banks, usually tiny banks, right? Like banks with one branch, with a couple of branches, and then you have on top of these local banks, you have you have financial institutions that are working just like for the middle school teachers of California, right? Like, or public school teachers of California, and they have like this whole entire financial ecosystem surrounding like public school teachers. And typically they don't have the wire transfer capability, and if that's the case, what people are gonna do, and we do see many clients from California facing this reality, in which they are gonna need to open a bank account with something like Chase, right? Open a bank account with Chase just for the purpose of sending money to Brazil, because the remitting bank, it does need wire transfer capability to wire the funds outside of the U.S. But Brazil vibes, I think I think I did have a client with Navy Federal that was unable to send funds, but maybe I'm just mixing up the names, okay? But the bottom line is like the wire transfer capability. So if Navy Federal, if they have a wire transfer capability to abroad, that's all you need. All right. Tora, thank you, Luciano and Matt Gaines, for the help. Absolutely, Tora. Happy to be of help. I am a beast live. With the digital nomad visa and a minimum $18,000 in my account, will that allow me to come back and forth from the United States when I want? All right, so Beast, the digital nomad will allow you to leave Brazil and come back as many times as you want. Okay, so there is no limit. There is no limit in terms of entering and leaving Brazil. We usually recommend you, like at least at the beginning, let's say if you're traveling into Brazil, and if you are in Brazil, you apply for the digital nomad in Brazil. We typically like our clients to avoid traveling during the application period because sometimes, like they're short in allowed stay. Sometimes, like when they are going to return, they're going to, like whenever you're crossing borders, right, it's always a delicate time. So if you are applying for something more longer term, ideally you're not going to be leaving and entering the country many times. Okay. This said, we do have clients who may need to attend something urgent back in the US. And in this case, yes, we're going to support our clients even during the application process. But after you have your resident card, I mean, if you want to travel a couple of times every single month back to the United States or even, to other countries and continents, no problem. You're free to do so. All right, Beast. Minimum, I noticed Portobello, Santa Catarina is one of the fastest growing areas in Brazil with hundreds of huge new construction projects. Is this a good idea to invest in, or is the market likely to collapse there? Minimum, thank you for this question. We had a client not long ago who was reviewing a pre-construction, right, like an off-plan property, meaning that there was a plan, there was no building, and he was invited by the realtor to invest in this off-plan at a discount. That's very common in Brazil, very common in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, pretty much everywhere, but now especially in Portobello. And when we are doing the review for this client, this developer, they were trying to build, I think it was over 1,000 apartments in a single project. It would be like several towers. It wouldn't be a single building, right? Like it would be like a set of buildings, but the number was just massive. And then we did some research on the developer. He was someone who was somewhat new to this market, but this person had already delivered in full like 2 buildings. Okay, but the problem we had with that particular case, it was the difference in scale, right? Like the first one, I don't know, maybe this developer, delivered, I'm just gonna guess, 50 apartments altogether, and now he is developing 1,000 apartments. To make things even more concerning to me, it was the fact that there was no memorial de incorporação or memorial of incorporation, which is legally a requirement for a developer to sell stuff that is not ready. Okay, so if you're selling stuff that's not ready, it's almost like you're selling stocks, or you're gonna be offering stocks. Like you need to be regulated by the public, authority to make sure you're just not deceiving people out there. So, from a development perspective in Brazil, that's gonna happen with the Memorial de Incorporação, which is like a very thorough project that you're gonna need to provide to the authorities. They are gonna review, and eventually they are gonna allow you to record the Memorial of Incorporation with the Registro de Imóveis or the Real Estate Registry. So this is the bare minimum. And guess what? This developer offered the 1,000 plus apartments didn't have the Memorial de Incorporação. And that was very concerning. So at the end of the review, we told this client, listen, we don't think you should proceed. This looks more like a startup, right? Because this person or this group, they never really developed anything close to this type of scale, and they don't have like the basic paperwork for a development like this. So you basically just taking the chances like you were investing in a startup. However, you're not getting the compensation that you would be getting from a startup. So it does not sound like a good deal to us, and it's not advisable. And then, like once we told him that, he went to the developer, and the developer was saying, well, you know what? The problem is that the authorities here, they are not like releasing the memorials of incorporation, and we need to move, so we're moving fast, but yes, there is an application in course. So, like the developer or realtors, they will never just, keep quiet. Like they're going to come back with 10 reasons why the person should still invest in those things. My opinion, I would not invest in Portobello, right? I know Portobello, an amazing area in Santa Catarina, but just like you framed it in your question, it is I think there is too much hype in this market. Developers, they are, they are working in a way that I don't think it is conservative enough for me to put my money in their hands. All right, so that would be my take. Yes, Manny Moon. So my opinion is that you should stay away unless you're buying something that is already in the market, okay? And guess what? Because of the sheer number of new developments in Portobello, many times it's not difficult for you to find an interesting, attractive property for a competitive price, right? Just because, the sheer number of new developments. And that's another reason for you to be careful, because even if you end up getting what you're paying for, guess what? Maybe it's not gonna be providing the crazy return rates that realtors are gonna tell you so, right? Realtors are gonna be talking about returns between 10-15% a year, and we know from experience that returns are gonna be more like 5 to 7%. Now, if you have a huge number of units being delivered to the market, even for short-term rentals, like how are you gonna get enough guests, to make a 7% return per year work? So that's my take, Manny Moon. All right, Manny Moon, very happy to share my perspective on Portobello. But listen, Portobello, Santa Catarina in general, right? There is a reason for why the immigration system in Santa Catarina is just like, swamped, right? Like, there's just like too many people going to Santa Catarina, to Florianópolis, Portobello, Camboriú, Bombinhas, and so many other destinations in Santa Catarina. And that's why nowadays, and we track, for those of you who don't know, we track how much time it takes for you to secure an appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police. This is done on a state level basis. And as of today, Santa Catarina is by far, like the one with the biggest backlog of appointments, and for a reason, right? Pretty, beautiful state, one of the safest areas in the country, with lots of nice real estate, particularly Camboriú. Camboriú is just kind of similar to Portobello. And Camboriú nowadays is known in Brazil as the Dubai of Brazil. The properties in Camboriú, they are just like, mind-blowing in terms of dimensions, in terms of prices. It's just like a very unique market in Brazil. James Rochas, obrigado. Can we apply for a second renewal of the Digital Nomad visa? I heard that there is no strict rule for max 2 years. James Rochas, listen, we recorded a YouTube video about that. So if you would just go to our YouTube channel and search for how many times can I renew the digital nomad visa, you're gonna see the whole explanation over there. But the short answer is, as of today, you are allowed to renew multiple times. Okay, if you want to know more about background information on why the digital nomad was conceived for a single renewal, and as of today we have clients applying for their third renewal, watch this video and then you're going to understand all the nuance behind the renewal, and then it's going to help you plan accordingly, James. Okay, pelo mundo, if my FBI background apostille expires 15 days after I arrive in Brazil and I apply for retirement visa when I arrive there, will I have to return to get the background report done again to continue? Yeah, this timeline is certainly concerning. Is certainly concerning. Okay, you most probably will have to get a fresh FBI background check. Okay, the FBI background check, it is somewhat concerning from a timeline perspective, because once it's issued, you still need to get an apostille from Washington, D.C., which is going to take time, and then you need to have this document physically in Brazil. And, like we typically try to line up, the FBI background check with your application process. So you're saying, and I apply for retirement visa when I arrive there. Like, so here at the firm, we try to make those things to work in parallel. Okay, so like we're gonna check, particularly if you are applying for the retirement visa, you're gonna need like the apostilled birth certificate. Birth certificate needs to match with your passport. You're gonna need many documents apostilled. So all of those things, they need to be troubleshot. When you are applying in Brazil. So, it's not just like one thing and then you apply. Like, it is a set of different things that may need to be worked in parallel for your application to work best from a time perspective. James, obrigado, amigo. Your opinions are always appreciated. Thank you, James. Thank you for keep asking interesting questions here at the channel. And because we're talking about, the possibility of a market crashing, there is another thing of concern to foreign citizens. I was taking a look at this, question today. It was about fraud in Brazil, and there are, like different types of fraud. And maybe I'm gonna comment on a couple of them. There is like and they're about, like we have in our website, I think we have 9 different types of fraud discussed in our website. So, if you're concerned about fraud in Brazil, you can come to our website, just Google for fraud, and then you're gonna find this page in which we discuss the 9 main types of fraud targeting foreign citizens in Brazil. And before we even develop this idea, I want to just highlight that many times the fraudster, like, this crime ring is not necessarily in Brazil. We have seen many of them, which we can clearly tell they're not even in Brazil. And how can we tell that they're not in Brazil? Well, because the narrative talks about Brazil throughout the fraud scheme, but when the fraudsters, when they ask you for payment, they're going to ask you for a payment elsewhere, right? It is typically in a developing country or a taxation paradise, right? Like one of those kind of islands, and it is never gonna be in Brazil that they're gonna be asking your money to be sent to. They're not gonna be asking you to send. In most of the schemes, we saw already for people asking money in the United States, but they also try to avoid the United States because the United States has a well-developed, you know, structure to catch fraudsters, right? So they're going to be typically in other areas. They may be, I don't know, like in the African continent. They may be in Asia. Sometimes they are in this, you know, taxation paradises. Sometimes they are in Europe, okay? And just to highlight, right, like the frauds has the Brazil team, but not necessarily is being perpetrated by Brazilians, and that's very interesting. And one typical example is going to be the, you know, Brazilian girlfriend or the Brazilian boyfriend. And the idea here is that someone is going to be on a dating app. They are going to get in touch with a person who says to be like the person from the picture, and, you know, not surprisingly, it's going to be like a beautiful person on the picture. And then, you know, the victim is going to develop a kind of relationship with the fraudster over whatever platform. It could be WhatsApp, it could be you know, like it could be through the dating app, the dating website itself. And, you know, in the future, the fraudster would not show up because guess what? The fraudster was not the person of the picture. But unfortunately, nowadays with AI, guess what? You know, even a beautiful person from a picture could show up on a screen and be, guess what? AI. There was a very, you know, and, you know, sometimes they even target Brazilians as well. So there was a very, you know, famous case in Brazil, famous to us Brazilians, of a lady, I think she was in her 60s, and she was deceived by Brad Pitt. Of course, he wasn't Brad Pitt, the actor. It was someone pretending to be Brad Pitt, and she was 100% convinced that she was dating or she was, you know, in a romantic relationship with Brad Pitt, because guess what? He would call her and she could see, you know, Brad Pitt talking to her on the screen, right? So this is happening more often and more convincingly, unfortunately. And the narrative goes like this, right? Once, you know, the fraudster and the victim, they've been, you know, talking for a while or chatting or, you know, typing over WhatsApp. The criminal is gonna, you know, share a sad story about not being able to pay the rent and this type of stuff. And eventually they are gonna, you know, expect that the foreign citizen is gonna say, you know what, like, I mean, you know, your rent is just, I don't know, $500 a month. Guess what? I can help you with that. And then this is gonna start a pattern of the criminal asking for more and more money, and eventually, you know, to the point that the victim is going to realize, you know, it's just like a scheme. Now, this is like the most obvious one, but we also have, you know, schemes targeting businesses, believe it or not. And just to tell you about two that are going to be targeting businesses, there is one that is always, you know, startling to me, which is the business loan. And that's because Brazil has one of the largest banks in the world, and it's like a state bank that's going to be, you know, providing loans to businesses, especially in Brazil, but sometimes, you know, outside of Brazil. And because this bank is so big, it's the BNDES, BNDES, you know, fraudsters, they are going to take advantage, and they are going to be offering huge loans, like for $1 million, $2 million, $3 million at low interest rates, like 6%, which by Brazilian standards is like, you know, pretty low. And guess what? Very often they are going to be targeting, believe it or not, U.S. businesses. And we probably saw, I don't know how many, but many businesses, being deceived to the point of spending like $100,000, believe it or not, $100,000 in fees to the scammers, because the scammers say, yeah, we're gonna, get you this loan, but guess what? We need to develop a business plan. And after that, well, now we need to pay a lawyer, to vouch for the transaction, for the loan. And later on, they keep bringing new stuff. So it starts with, I don't know, like $20,000. And at the point that the victim realizes that they are pretty much being scammed, they're going to be out for 150,000 US dollars. And we've seen firsthand that type of thing happening, right? So pretty sad and pretty concerning. And my tip is to say, listen, if you are unable to secure a loan in the US, it shouldn't make any sense for you to be able to secure a loan in Brazil, right? So that's my usual recommendation to anyone who's like entertaining the possibility of seeking a business loan in Brazil. The second scam is going to be related to commodities. Many countries, like in the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa, like they need real bad, like sugar. They're going to need, coffee beans and this type of stuff. And then they are going to be, interacting with many parties in Brazil to try to find available inventory. And then guess what? They are going to end up, bumping into scammers who are going to develop a whole website pretending to be a trade company. And they are going to end up many times, paying some amount in advance in order to have like containers of the commodity shipped to their countries, right? And of course, like, they are not going to pay most of the price until the container arrives at the port. But it's not uncommon, unfortunately, in Brazil for producers to ask for, some payment ahead of time, even before you deliver the container to the port. And this is going to be another very typical type of scheme run in Brazil. Well, so, sharing with you guys. If you want to know more, again, you can come to our website and research about it. But I guess, the bottom line here is for you to be always skeptical of things that are too good to be true. All right? That's the message over here. Let's take a look at the chat. Pelo Mundo, obrigada. You welcome, Pelo Mundo. Minimum, if you are a permanent resident, what are the options to sponsor your adult children to get residency in Brazil? Is this possible? What are the general requirements? So, Minimum, it is not usually possible for you to provide the typical family reunification. That's the technical term we use in Brazil. If you have, let's say, it could be like retirement, it could be permanent residency. You can, guess what, sponsor. You can be the caller. Like the caller is like how we technically say in Brazil, the caller for another person. But this is going to be typically limited to non-adult children, unless your children are in college. So let's say if you have a child who's like 23 years old and your child is still in college, there is a good shot for you to apply for family reunification and bring your child under family reunification. Okay, now if it is like an adult child and this child is no longer in college, I know it is someone 30 years old, typically there is no way for you to give access to this child unless there are exceptional circumstances. Let's say if it is a child with disability, right? So if you have a child with a disability, very often the Brazilian immigration is going to be amenable to you bringing this child to Brazil. The same thing for parents. Let's say if you have a parent who's currently, dependent on you for either care or for financials, there is a good chance the Brazilian immigration is gonna allow you to bring this parent under family reunification. Okay, Minimum. But the idea here is that outside of like children under 18th or parents who are dependent on you, it gotta be something exceptional for you to apply. Tora, what kind of status do we need to have in Brazil to be able to buy rural property? Is the RNM sufficient for rural property purchase? Tora, such an interesting question. Believe it or not, we just updated a page of our website regarding rural properties. I think is the most comprehensive source of information about buying rural property in Brazil as a foreign citizen. It was okay. The page was okay, but believe it or not, it was written, I think, in 2012. So it was like 14 years ago. And so we kind of, rewrote the page from the scratch. Of course, we did use some level of AI, right, to complement the information. But I think this page is a great source for you. And let me share here. Right, so this is the updated page. Here, the complete guide for foreign investors. The questions comparing urban to rural. And here is the answer to your first question. Like, once you have the RNM card, it's gonna get you access to buying smaller tracts of land. So as of today, Tora, you cannot buy any rural land at all. But guess what? Once you have the RNM card, then you're going to be able to buy smaller tracts of land. And then in addition to the smaller tracts of land, you should be able to buy larger ones with a little bit more involvement. Like if you have a project, if you seek a special type of authorization, you can also buy larger tracts of land. So all of that you're going to see here on this page, okay? If you just come to our website, you just search for rural land, and then you're going to find this page, which was rewritten, okay, to give you more knowledge about that. So here is the cap. These caps, they are in addition to the per city size. So for every Brazilian city, there's going to be a specific size limit that you need to follow. And in addition to those limits, there are those caps based on nationality. Okay, there are also some areas that are going to be a complete bar. Basically like border areas, like borders between Brazil and another country, national security areas. But take a look, Tora. I think you're gonna like this page. We're trying to keep somewhat short so it doesn't become like a book. But I would say the main concepts about foreign citizens buying rural land in Brazil are gonna be addressed in this page. Ok, Marisa Navas, olá, doutor Luciano, estamos na parceria, na pescaria, Mas ligados na sua live. Alright, Marisa. Marisa and Ricardo, they are fishing. They are fishing in Portugal. Marisa, let me know which river, qual rio que vocês estão pescando? Estou curioso. Me fala o nome do rio no qual vocês estão pescando. So Marisa and Ricardo, they are fishing. I don't know which river in Portugal, but they are fishing. But during the fishing, they are still watching our live. Thank you so much, Marisa and Ricardo. Christopher Costa, boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. Boa tarde, Christopher. I just saw that Rendimento created a conta escrow product. Can this be a valid landing spot for sending money to Brazil to purchase real estate for the investment visa? Christopher, that's new to me. Thank you for sharing. And interesting enough, because we are formal partners of Rendimento, but I'm not always in touch directly with Rendimento. Our real estate team, they are in touch with Rendimento. And yes, I mean, they typically know the requirements for the Brazil investment visa, and it may be an option. Now, this said, Christopher, like when we work with Banco Rendimento, we work all the time on transactions for the real estate investor visa with Banco Rendimento. We work with other banks like Brasa Bank. We work with Topazio Bank. And we also work, we have 4 partnerships. We have Rendimento, Brasa, we have Topazio, there is another one, Brasa, Topazio, Rendimento. Oh yes, Money Corp, right? These are the 4 banks we partner with. Now, they typically perform the role of an escrow, okay, Christopher? So they probably saw, right? I'm not sure if working with us or working with different, providers, that many people use the currency exchange transaction as a way to emulate an escrow. And they said, you know what, instead of emulating an escrow, guess what? Let's provide an escrow, right? But the idea here, when we handle those transactions, we just say, listen, bank, you're not going to release the exchanged currency to the seller until the day of the closing. So we're going to be working with Banco Rendimento to release the funds on the day of the closing. Now, if they're structuring an escrow, I guess, the terms would be that until there is an escritura, until there is a closing, the funds are not going to be released to the seller. That's an interesting sharing, Christopher. All right, we have a minimum. So grateful for these lives and your open and genuine sharing. You are a gem. Thank you so much, Minimum. I really appreciate. That's the idea, right? Nowadays there is no room for, keeping information to yourself. I think we're being blessed by working with the international community, and this has been a principle, for a long time, since our inception, right? To provide a service that we would be proud of, and to be very open in terms of sharing information. I think it can help our clients to understand the journey, to plan accordingly for the journey. And guess what? When it's time to execute, most of the time they're going to say, you know what, now, being drinking from this source, and if I need to hire someone to help me with the actual implementation, let's hire, this law firm that has been sharing knowledge freely, right? So that's our strategy. We share, and eventually clients are gonna come to us and hire us for service. So that's very good to hear, Minimum. I really appreciate it. Brazil Vibes, thank you so much, Brazil Vibes. Brazil Vibes is buying me lunch. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us on Sunday. Enjoy a lunch dinner on me. I appreciate Brazil Vibes. Very generous of you. Thank you so much. All right, look at that. Marisa is getting back to me. Olá, Dr. Luciano, estamos no Rio Tejo, em Lisboa, right? It couldn't be more traditional. The Tejo River in Lisbon, that's where they are fishing. All right, that's exciting. I wish I was there with you to, eat some, I guess, not sure if you guys gonna cook, if you're gonna have like a fish barbecue, right? Like, Portuguese people, just like us Brazilians, they enjoy a good barbecue. Enjoy, Marisa and Ricardo. So nice. All right, Christopher, I was surprised to see this appear on their website since you always taught us here that the escrow is not a common concept in Brazil. Exactly, Christopher. And maybe that's why they are launching this service, right? Because escrow is not common at all. And there is a challenge with this concept, Christopher, because the sellers, right, like the Brazilian population is basically unaware of how this thing works elsewhere, how it works in the United States, in the UK, in so many other countries. And what happens is, like, if you try to bring a seller from Rio de Janeiro to the table, saying that there's going to be an escrow account, I can tell you, Christopher, that you're not going to be able to buy a good property in Rio de Janeiro unless it is something like for 20 million reais, 30 million reais, because for that range, guess what? Sellers, they need to be more accommodating, okay? But if you're going to be trying to buy something in Copacabana for 500,000 reais, for 1 million reais, I guarantee no seller will entertain an offer to work with Banco Rendimentos escrow account, because for them it's just not something that they would ever consider. Like, it's not part of the culture in Brazil. Now, again, if it is like a higher average ticket, right? If it is a 20 million, 30 million reais property, and trust me, there are many in Rio de Janeiro for that ticket amount, then yes, they would accommodate some kind of escrow account. Now, for Rendimento, like, they have a good reputation, they have a well-recognized brand. I guess, like, for them, it's going to be a matter, listen, if we have like 10 or 20 escrow accounts a month, that's good for us. I mean, this is going to be more than what they have as of yesterday, which was no escrow accounts. So, it does sound like an interesting concept. And maybe with not only Rendimento, but other players as well, the concept of escrow could popularize in Brazil, hopefully, right? Because I think it's something that would increase the safety of real estate acquisitions in Brazil for foreign citizens a lot. Someone else who's trying to do that, Christopher, is actually registries, the so-called cartórios in Brazil. So registries in Brazil, they also have like this kind of possibility of performing that. And because they are dealing with the transaction, right, from a more like a neutral perspective, it could also be something to be considered. Not many cartórios have tried to develop that yet, because, again, it's just not part of our culture. But guess what? Someone needs to start the process, and that's what Banco Rendimento may be trying to do over here. All right, Many Moon, Marisa Navas, boa sorte na pescaria. There you go, Many Moon, Marisa. All right, so we are unfortunately arriving at the end of our live stream. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's live stream. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like our live stream. This helps with our business. This helps with other people just like you to find our content. And don't forget to come back on Wednesday when we're gonna have our traditional Wednesday live stream. And on Wednesdays, we meet a little bit earlier in the day, typically at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Thank you all and wishing you all a blessed